markets are increasingly demanding carbon-free products. Realizing the impending threat to the economies, several countries have announced net zero targets. In the upcoming panel discussion, we'll discuss the emerging clean hydrogen market in India, the role of gas. I would again like to invite Sudhir Pal Singh, editor, ET Energy World, the Economic Times, to moderate the discussion. Over to you, Sudhir.
A very warm welcome to all of you on this panel, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of the discussion today is emerging clean hydrogen market in India, the role of gas. And this discussion is part of the larger annual gas conclave, the larger event that we have. And the eminent set of panelists that we have today for this discussion include Mr. SSV Ramakumar, Director R&D at IOC, Indian Oil. Anurag Pandey, he's a team lead science and technology, hydrogen economy at RIL. Sanjeev Paul, he is VP of safety, health and sustainability at Tata Steel. We have Ravneet Maan, she is the VP of Invest India, and Shilpa Gupta, GM, India Engineering, GE Gas Power. I welcome all of you again on this discussion. Let me begin this this entire discussion by asking Mr. Ramakumar to comment first upon upon his overall views on the emerging market for clean hydrogen in India, right? And there has been a lot of activity in this space in the past some time. Both from a policy point of view, the government has announced some new things, hydrogen mission, etc. There are a few global investors showing interest here. Domestic companies like IOC itself is, has started work long ago, in fact, on a lot of projects there. So a lot is changing in terms of technology, policy, investor interest. Where do you think, as the director at, such a large company like IOC, where do you think the market stands today? Where do you think the country stands today when it comes to adopting hydrogen as part of the larger clean fuel kind of vision? Yeah.
Thank you, Sudhir. It's always a pleasure to converse with you on this subject, and good morning to my fellow panelists on this event. Yeah, I think it is the time for hydrogen. That's the tagline. In fact, earlier also there were so many waves of interest in hydrogen, not only in India but elsewhere in the globe, but they all had along the course of the time. But I think all over the world, with the climate debate and climate discussions, especially at COP26, whatever targets that each country has set for themselves and for the world, I think hydrogen, inevitability of hydrogen is writ large, and the current traction seems to be taking hydrogen to its logical end and give it its rightful place in the energy basket. This is my first impression. Unlike the previous waves, there is some finality and there is some certainty about ushering in hydrogen economy as the ultimate green fuel option. Now there is no debate that why hydrogen. It is from why it has been transformed to when it is. So just to give you some global numbers, like for example, McKinsey's latest projection indicates that currently it is globally, on global basis, the hydrogen consumption figures of 2020 stands at 90 million metric ton per annum. And McKinsey projected that by 2030, this is going to be 140. These numbers may not be very new to all of us who are in this field. But what is interesting in the breakup that McKinsey has brought forward is that there are certain hitherto unknown sectors for hydrogen. Now they are giving a clear-cut apportionment for those sectors. For example, mobility. By 2030, they feel that 18 million metric ton per annum of hydrogen consumption would be for mobility segment. new industrial segment, which are zero today. For example, I think my colleague from Tata Steel on this panel would elaborate more. But new industrial segments, they occupy, they would account for 6 million metric ton. Okay, that is the global projection and the global euphoria for hydrogen in terms of predictions. But what is happening in our country? What is the Indian status? KPMG's projections for India are right now, our hydrogen consumption stands at 6 million metric ton. And by 2030, they are projecting it to be just doubled, around 12 million metric ton. And even now, the lion's share is from refining segment and fertilizers to a small extent. But going forward, I think while refining and fertilizers will continue to occupy the lion position as far as hydrogen pie is concerned, but definitely some new industrial segments are going to be added. As far as policy is concerned, I think there was never a decisive movement from the government side hitherto on hydrogen. There was a national hydrogen roadmap, draft national hydrogen roadmap that was announced. Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Finance Minister, they made big announcements, and in fact, Honorable Prime Minister said that India is going to emerge as the export hub for green hydrogen by 2030, and a lot of price targets are also in the atmosphere. But having involved in this drafting this draft hydrogen roadmap myself on one particular section, by the way, this was drafted by MNRE, and one section was I convened the one section of production part of hydrogen. And so this draft hydrogen mission essentially looks at 4 or 5 tenets. These are market development, pilot plants. Lot of pilot projects are conceived in this draft mission. Infrastructure and supply chain, there is a lot of focus on building the infrastructure by way of hydrogen refueling stations and pipeline network, which would be amenable for transporting the hydrogen, raising the compression pressures of hydrogen for transportation in the conventional cylinder like things, regulatory and standards. In fact, already PESO has formulated a committee to consider a higher compression pressure. Right now, it is only permissible pressure is only 200 bar. But in order to make hydrogen a reality, especially for mobility segment, the compression pressures needs to be raised, and it can go as high as 700 bar. But supporting metallurgy is required for storage infrastructure. So I think this committee is looking, and there is a mission implementation. MNRE suggested in that draft hydrogen roadmap that there should be a mission which entities should actually spearhead this and how it should go about. And there is, I think I will just, before I stop, I would only say that there's a great debate right now going on in Niti Aayog and in industry circles and in MNRE about green hydrogen consumption obligation, GHCO. It's a very popular acronym now for those of us who are involved in this, and they have singled out refining and fertilizer segments to make it mandatory for this obligatory green hydrogen consumption. And various kinds of numbers are going on. But I think the latest numbers are by 23-24, it will be 5% of the total hydrogen that is being used in these two segments will be green hydrogen. By 26-27, it will be 23%. And by 29 and 30, it will be 50% of the total hydrogen that is going to be consumed. It will be converted from gray to green. They don't want to go the journey via blues and blue pluses and all. Straight away, they want to leapfrog or pole vault from gray to green. There are so many imperatives, so many challenges as we go along in this discussion. I would be discussing some of the challenges and some of the perceptions in this journey of leapfrogging from gray to green. Thank you.
Thankfully, you have stopped, sir. Otherwise, I was thinking that you're going to cover everything, not going to leave anything for other speakers. But no, that was on a lighter note. Very, very relevant and important comments, there. And that's one of the best thing about conversing with you on hydrogen. You look at every single thing under the sun. One thing that I would comment upon before moving on to other speakers is, this thing about obligation. We started with renewable purchase obligation many years ago, and it didn't work until the costs in renewable case at least came down. So there's something about this obligation that that should remind us that it's not the panacea, right? Ultimately, a lot of different things have to work together to ensure that a technology picks up. But anyway, no doubt about it, it's a very, very important move. And compression pressure is is slightly a bit of a technicality for us. Perhaps Anurag will be able to better explain those things for to us, its relevance, etc. Later in the discussion. So Anurag, let me turn to you at this point, and and ask, like Mr. Ramakumar, you belong to a company which is very, very often in the news every other day. There are big things being talked about or announced on hydrogen, right? It's part of a larger green kind of a vision. How do you look at this entire space? What is the scope of this fuel? As a person who is looking after a new technology from a fuel point of view, what is its scope? And as a clean energy technology, and what is the current state of affairs when you look at policy and market development, things like that?
So thanks, Sudhir, and good morning to everyone here. So first of all, let me, be honest and, probably congratulate you that at least you have not picked up the topic saying, green hydrogen, but clean hydrogen, right? And as Dr. Ramakumar was talking about, we have, pole vaulted or leapfrogged or whatever from the gray to, green completely. And we will, discuss, we will, continue to have those debates, discussions, because what we are talking about is not a small thing. I think what we need to understand as a citizen, global citizen, it's a tectonic move, what we are trying to do, right? Historically, if you see as a human civilization, we have gone from, using fuel, energy source, which has a higher carbon to hydrogen ratio. What you mean is like, there is a larger carbon content and a very small, amount of hydrogen there. Hydrogen has an important aspect in whatever we do. We don't realize it. It's a smallish molecule, but one of the first element to come in existence after the Big Bang, right? So the hydrogen has a very important role. We started from obviously the biomass, then the coal, and then obviously the oil and gas. And as we progressed on this fuel source, we have reduced our carbon to hydrogen ratio. So obviously, if you look at that progression, hydrogen is the obvious and the pan ultimate, let's say, the source for the energy. Although the energy, the hydrogen itself is not an energy source, but an energy vector, as Dr. Ramkumar would probably correct me if I call it an energy source, because it is derived from multiple sources, right? I mean, hydrogen is not freely available, unfortunately, to us unless you go to the other planetary systems or somewhere else in the universe. So you can derive hydrogen from multiple sources, and that is where this whole color or different types of hydrogen we are talking about. And when we talk about hydrogen, obviously we are talking it from the hydrogen economy point of view, because energy is fundamental to any activity what we do, even the materials what we consume, any modern materials, chemicals, or anything whatsoever. So the hydrogen has a very important role. And finally, as a civilization, probably we have realized the right place for the hydrogen, I would say. I mean, it is still people are trying to understand, and it will take some time people to have this idea going on why hydrogen. But obviously there were the sci-fi writers who had written about the hydrogen economy about a century ago, right? But it needed that push, and I think as Dr. Ramkumar was talking about, there has been many hype cycles of hydrogen in past, but the pandemic in the last 2 years has probably allowed us as a human to look at what is important to us. What is important to us is the sustainability, right? The growth with sustainability, and hydrogen offers you that. So I would say the discussion on hydrogen has just started. I wouldn't say that we all understand what needs to be done and where we are going with it. To be very frank, anybody who claims it, I would like to hear them really how this will pan out. So the discussions are happening, and the hydrogen discussion in India is in fact even more nascent than any other the developed economies, because Japan has been thinking about it for last almost 50 years, since the 1970, the great oil crisis. Again, Dr. Ramakumar can brief you more about it. But people who have had energy security issues, all those economies have been thinking how to go to a sustainable, secure energy supply, right? And India obviously is no exception to that. We import about 80% of our energy needs. So to me, I mean, lately, when I'm trying to explain someone, what is hydrogen economy, the easier analogy what I can use is, like, I call it RE 2.0, right? So RE 1.0 is basically about generating the electricity from from the natural forces of sun, wind, and everything. Everything, by the way, comes from the sun ultimately, but generating the electricity from there. Hydrogen goes a step forward in that direction. Instead of just restricting ourselves to electron, which is an amazing way of consuming energy, very efficient way of. Unfortunate part is that it cannot be stored for long hours, right? Long duration. And that is where the molecular form of energy storage comes in. And that is where the hydrogen, and why the hydrocarbons were so successful, is because those hydrocarbons can store that energy for longer durations. And that is where the hydrogen is going to replace that. So in one way, what you are doing is you are extending the renewable share in the entire energy pool, because the electricity as an energy vector covers only about 15 to 20%. Even in the most advanced economy, you could probably push to about 30-40%, but not beyond. And that is where the hydrogen would be able to go beyond. The reason I'm keeping at this level the discussion is because what we do from here onwards, right? What are going to be our ways and how we are going to do. I mean, that dialogue is still happening. As Dr. Ramkumar was saying, that the discussions are happening at a multiple level within the ministries and everywhere, and we are all trying to understand how we can solve it. Because somebody was the other day was saying that it's like the plane is flying and you are trying to fix the engine, right? So the economy has to run. We can't suddenly shut down the whole economy engine and say let's move to the hydrogen tomorrow. So how to do this systematically in a long run, while the economy can take that shock, let's say, whatever we are trying to give, and emerge out that not just replacing it from a decarbonization point of view, but also from an energy security. Because for India, remember, it's about not just decarbonization, but also the energy security. And then obviously third part, probably exporting that energy eventually to the other worlds and helping them to decarbonize their part also. So that's how we look at the ultimately, and at least personally, I look at the whole hydrogen economy and where it is today.
Thanks, Anurag. Again, very relevant points. A lot of technical jargon, slightly for us, but then it's very heartening to note that somebody's talking about the fact that it's not just about decarbonization for India. Ultimately, energy access. That's what you're referring to. Security matters, and whenever we look at any new fuel, we have to look at its utility in that entirety of the concepts. Anurag, very quickly, one thing that I wanted to ask you, you said RE 1.0 is what we are currently at, talking at the electron level point of view. So would you say moving to hydrogen is RE 2.0? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. So, hydrogen for me is like a RE 2.0. Yeah.
Oh, okay, fine.
I mean, you're not living the electron production, because we as a human civilization only have understood how to produce electrons, but yet we can't produce molecules and the materials itself. So that's why we use the electron and then convert into another form of energy, which is one of the form is hydrogen there.
Okay, I remember many years ago, any discussion on hydrogen would not move beyond the boardroom stage. for simple, and the first reason was storage is not safe. Have we moved beyond that point now? Would you say that?
So it's funny. I mean, in the circles, and again, Dr. Ramkumar can say, I mean, the refineries and all the industry, hydrogen is not new for us. We have been handling hydrogen, almost a century or even plus, right? And you don't see and hear those accidents at least related to hydrogen. Even that image, what we have as a general population of Hindenburg, where the whole ship burns, it was not actually because of hydrogen. If you dig deeper there, it was the, the layer which, the material which was built, that caused the fire. So it's quite safe. That's a technical details why it is safe, but we can get into that if you want.
Okay. Moving on to Mr. Paul, I can see that you've been smiling, looking at these, hearing these comments, sir. As a user industry, how do you look at hydrogen, the evolving hydrogen landscape in this country? Mr. Ramakumar gave a certain perspective. Anurag gave a perspective which has its own relevance. How do you? What's your perspective on hydrogen?
Thank you, Sudhir. Greetings to the panelists and everybody else who's listening to it. This webinar from Tata Steel. I guess some wonderful views have already come from Dr. Ramakumar and Anurag Pandey. My take and Tata Steel's take on hydrogen. India is going to be one of the fastest growing economies going forward. That is a given. And all think tanks, including the International Energy Agency, believes, and I'm talking about steel here, that the steel production and consumption in India will go up by around 4 to 5 times by mid-century. So if we are at 100 million tons today, in the last 75 years, we have reached at 100 of independence, we have reached at a level of 100 million tons per annum. It is expected to go to 400 million tons plus by 2050. So an addition of another 300 million tons in the next 30 odd years in an industry from a climate point of view, which is hard to abate, meaning that the technologies to decarbonize this sector is not as yet economically viable. Because the cost of hydrogen, for example, which is a technology for which can decarbonize steel going forward, is around $5 to $6 a kg. And unless it comes down to close to $1 a kg at a carbon price, prevailing carbon price of emission, which, a regulation that doesn't exist as of now. But again, that I'm hoping will happen in time to come, of around $40 per ton of carbon dioxide emissions. So these are the kind of mathematics that they're talking of. So how to grow sustainably? And Tata Steel prides itself in being a responsible corporate citizen, and we want to grow sustainably. So the challenge going forward to continue to maintain a market share that we have as of now, which will need to grow with the size of the pie, which is going to grow by around 4 times, is a big challenge. The various options surely are, the secondary market route where you remelt scrap or you capture the carbon and store it. Scrap is not going to be a very viable technology in India, whilst it will be an important aspect and will give us the early wins, but not enough scrap will be available in India. It will be available in the more developed markets where there is scrap embedded in the economies. And if you would have heard, Europe recently is looking to put a ban on export of scrap. That is the biggest source of scrap for the rest of the world. China will thrive on scrap because there's plenty of scrap embedded in the economy. Whereas India probably will not have that benefit to that extent. Carbon storage is an area of research, not really an option as of now. Carbon can be used, again, for which hydrogen will be required. Carbon avoidance will be the technology that India will need to move at or pursue, which will again require hydrogen. So hydrogen is going to be a very important aspect of the steel making technologies going forward. By when will it become very, very relevant is only time will tell. And as I told you, certain numbers from the today's cost of around $5 a kg, which is also gray hydrogen, as Dr. Ramakumar said, it needs to come down to around $1 a kg or 1.5 max, with a carbon emission price of around $40 per ton of carbon emissions. So these are the challenges that we see, which are going forward. But we see that the Ministry of Steel is also very keen and is looking at industry for policy white papers on cluster strategies that would bring together the entire steel value chain, renewable energy, hydrogen, steel, demand, and scrappage in clusters which could be geographically together. And that risk of hydrogen that Anurag spoke of, that gets mitigated. Whilst, currently the usage of hydrogen is not so much, and it is consumed where it is produced, and that is why the risk is not very apparent. But Sudhir, the safety risk that you spoke about is real, and we will need to be cognizant of that. The ministry is also looking at funding options that would support hydrogen and steel pilots through PLIs, tax rebates or grants, and looking at white papers from industry on these subjects. Other policy options, for example, what would be called as green steel? What is it that should be supported through these policies? Carbon dioxide reporting frameworks or lead market creation. So the regulatory framework is also nascent, and we are looking at how it will evolve. And we are getting ready for a future where we know, as Dr. Ramkumar said, hydrogen is going to be inevitable. And India will be a primary, for India, hydrogen will be a primary source of energy going forward.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you, sir, for those great comments again. You're basically talking about the maths of carbon emission and trying to say how hydrogen will remain relevant for steel making technologies. But then, of course, cost has to come down over a period of time. And you're saying that it's still, even from regulatory framework point of view, it's nascent to talk about that. Safety, no doubt, you said is very important. Personally, when I look at our performance from an industrial accidents point of view, right, it's hardly inspiring, right? Across industries, not talking about any particular industry or any particular company, but the performance is not that inspiring. So, so on that kind of background, the moment you start talking about something which like hydrogen, right, which already has this idea of safety built in, it's serious stuff. So coming to Ravneet here again, Ravneet, you coming from Invest India, and that's a very that organization is going to play a very important role going forward when it comes to the overall investment scenario, particularly when it comes to dealing with new areas, right, for the economy, whether it is infrastructure or within energy, etc., etc. How do you look at hydrogen? What's your overall view?
Thanks, Sudhir. I think it's a good time for me to step in because we've heard a lot of expert comments from Dr. Ramkumar, Anurag, and Sanjeev as well. And I think while I concur with almost everything that has been said, I would just want to take a small step back and focus on things from my perspective, where I come in at Invest India, being the National Investment Promotion and Facilitation Agency for the Government of India, and working very strongly in facilitating investments, primarily whether they being foreign direct investment and domestic investment as well. I think the mandate is clear. Vis-a-vis this discussion, the Prime Minister himself, he has put a tall order for the country to, aim for net zero carbon emissions by 2070. And, Dr. Ramkumar highlighted, the FM's budget speech as well. So clearly there's a lot happening in the background, and the time, like he said, is now, and that's clear. But I think it's important that we have a demand-centric hydrogen perspective as well. That's needed to advance this humanizing energy agenda that everyone's talking of, because the current conversation, as I see, it's focused very heavily on supply. It's focused on safety. It's focused on standards, storage, transportation. But I think there needs to be enough highlighting of the role of hydrogen users as well. And we must explore what's needed to trigger that demand, with a significant focus on the development of the infrastructure in a supply chain. And I think that's where, the role of an entity such as ours comes into play, trying to be that very effective conduit between, the private and the public sector, the private and the Government of India and the various ministries involved. So if I were to just, give you a glimpse of how, the government is trying to approach this in terms of business viability of, a robust hydrogen economy, there's numerous, efforts that are being taken, whether it be in terms of, augmenting production offtakes, whether it be in terms of increasing cost competitiveness of hydrogen, whether it be in terms of supporting manufacturing of components. Sanjeev Paul was referring to a PLI scheme under discussion for extending that to electrolyzers for green hydrogen. Whether it be, in terms of, having safety guidelines such as, the MOPNG, considering it now a mineral oil and making a change to the ORDA Act for that. Whether it be in terms of R&D, the various research programs that are being supported at, different platforms, and the kind of avenues that the government is trying to employ to make sure they're able to provide right now, even at this nascent stage, I would say a relatively easy playing ground to take off of, given that we are at a very nascent stage. Whether it be at, a tendering route, for example, NTPC and in Leh and the tall order of 25 kilowatts, pilot project that they're looking out for, or even IOCL's tender for PEM fuel cell electric buses. There's a lot that's happening. As Invest India, we're working with a lot of foreign companies. Wouldn't be able to name them here, but primarily a lot of them from France, Germany, Denmark, Italy, and Sweden, where we're working on possible collaborations with Indian entities here as well. NTPC has signed an MOU with Siemens for production of green hydrogen. SNAM, who we've been facilitating quite extensively in terms of, interactions with Greenco Energies in India, but also in terms of looking at, G2G MOUs and collaborations as far as green energy, is concerned, and having green hydrogen play a role in that conversation and that dialogue. And we've been quite instrumental in facilitating that and, trying to reach, I would say, a great progress in terms of moving the needle on those aspects, even in terms of, R&D applications. So the government, I'm not going to touch upon GHCOs as Dr. Ramkumar already did, but I think it's important to note that what the government and the various ministries are trying to do is they're trying to bring in a concerted effort, each one in their own purview. So for example, if MORTH is talking of 18% blend in CNG, it's talking of, safety requirements in the AIS standards, whether it's MOPNG, I already covered the ORDA Act, DST is, funding R&D into hydrogen technologies, Ministry of Power. We already, I think somebody already spoke of renewable purchase obligations, so we could have something similar on the lines of GHCO. But as you rightly mentioned, Sudhir, there is a pinch of salt that you need to take the gumption of that GHCO with, because certain things in the entire ecosystem sort of needs to come into play for it to really pan out the way you want it to. But I think the MNRE has put forth a very ambitious plan, as they proposed in their latest cabinet note, for green hydrogen makers from key sectors such as steel, fertilizers, refineries, to aggregate and offer it as a mega tender. And this was, a model, if you recall, something we had followed for LED disbursements also, where we really came down for the cost of the bulb from 300 to 60. So as Sanjeev was mentioning here, we're looking at 1 per kg or even 1.5 max. I think that is really the way to go in terms of cross industry collaboration, to be able to, derive those synergies and, really realize those efficiencies that we're really looking for. And that's, keeping that aside in terms of what the ministries are doing, what the PM and the FM have highlighted. I think it's important to note a lot of the efforts that the Indian PSUs have also put into place. I will not go into what your IOCL is doing, because I know Dr. Ramkumar will probably be covering, that later. But GAIL is doing their fair bit. The Indian Railways Green Fuel Vertical, the Organization of Alternate Fuel, they have invited bids for hydrogen cell-based, train on the rail network. I've already covered NTPC at Leh. They're also looking at, how blending in green hydrogen into their CDG network as well. And from the startup space, we see a lot of activity and a lot of, I would say, private partnerships coming into play. SFC Energy with FC Technology, IIT Bombay has come up with great research. So I think a fair bit has already been done in terms of also putting forth funds for R&D, trying to create a platform for collaboration of networks. But I think now it's time to formalize the landscape. So the National Hydrogen Energy Mission, I think, is a good step for that. and the clear outlines that it has, and we're all waiting eagerly for that to finally be to be out in public. But I think it's also important to now move beyond I feel project financing and the current dialogue, but to move into commercialization of these technologies. And while some may disagree that that's a step ahead, but I feel those are conversations we need to start off in parallel, and we are seeing great progress from different parts of the world in different conversations we are having, and it's exciting being a part of those conversations. But I think it's now time to, I would say, crystallize the discussion in a manner that can be articulated as a roadmap for easier implementation to arrive at the goal that all of us have here. And hence we are having this conversation.
Okay.
Sorry if I took longer than normal.
It's okay. No,
I felt we could put it out there. Yeah.
That's absolutely fine. No issues. So thanks for all that information, Ravneet. One thing that I want to ask is, you said there is no, in the beginning, you said there's not enough focus on demand. Why exactly are you saying that? If you can very briefly, in 2 lines, if you can clarify, what exactly do you mean? Do you think that the kind of, the way we are working out, demand scenarios, it's not good enough, or there is more that needs to be done there?
I feel if there is a consolidated, cross-sectoral demand projection, it will be easier to create certain backward mechanisms to ensure offtakes and address certain challenges that come with this particular fuel.
Okay, fine.
When you come round again, I would like to talk about the demand part.
Okay.
Part of that value chain.
Okay.
And maybe if you could bring green steel into that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. I would particularly remember the point when you said that, it's heartening to see a lot of PSU effort going there. And no doubt, it's very important that PSUs take they become the flag bearer when it comes to, a launch of a new technology, work on a new technology like hydrogen. In a lot of ways, this nation is built by PSUs, right? But anyway, that's a separate discussion. Let's move back to Mr. Ramakumar and try and understand from him in a slightly more granular fashion, if you can, share for the understanding of our audience and the speakers here, the different, projects that IOC is working on. How is IOC actually planning to develop the technology and its application across, various end-use industries? And so if you could share IOC's, milestones also from the development of hydrogen projects point of view.
Thank you, Sudhir. And in fact, after my opening comments, the other comments are also quite interesting. And in fact, I enjoyed Ravneet's submission. In fact, that is what is needed. We are looking for that. And to make all these plans that every one of us are having, are the dreams, if we may call. I think there's a financial angle to it, and people may think that PSUs are aflush with money, but I think some kind of investment is still very much welcome on these sunrise areas. So I think I would be too happy to talk to her offline for some of the projects. Coming back to your question about IOC's Indian Oil's specific initiatives, to briefly put it, I will categorize them into 3 buckets. One is commercial, right down and out commercial projects, then a host of pilot projects, and then R&D projects. Of course, we were the first R&D to start the hydrogen research in PSU segment. Just for the sake, for the information of the audience, I think the lone hydrogen dispensing station of this country is still with us in my own R&D premises, which was operational since a decade and a half period, and still it is the only hydrogen dispensing station, and we are setting up a few more. I'll tell you that. So as far as commercial project is concerned, in our run-up to meet this GHCO prospective GHCO mandate, for refining sector. We have announced that Mathura refinery, the total hydrogen consumption of Mathura refinery will be converted to grey, and we are moving very decisively. We are just going to place the expression of interest. We already had detailed discussion with almost more than 15 vendors who are interested in chipping in their might to realize our ambition. So we have a phased out target for that Mathura conversion, and selection of Mathura is also very, very topical for reasons almost obvious to everybody. Mathura refinery exists in Taj trapezium zone, and we want to tell it to the world that we are very responsible corporate citizen, and we want to maintain the heritage of the Taj. Whatever apprehensions that public might be having, but we are taking all the care that because of Mathura refinery, nothing is going to be affected. So by 2023 or 24, our target is to convert 10% of Mathura refinery consumption of hydrogen into green hydrogen from the grey. That is the first phase 1 target of Mathura. Then as far as pilot plants are concerned, let me tell you what Ravneet was mentioning. We just concluded the first pilot of running 50 DTC buses in Delhi NCR region as ordinary city CNG buses, but by sparking with 18% of hydrogen. And the results are fantastic, I must say. And this project is actually monitored by no less than Honorable Supreme Court. So we are just filing back the findings to Honorable Supreme Court and wait for their legislative consideration. But the results are extremely good, both in terms of emission reduction as well as in the fuel saving benefits. Apart from that, again, Ravneet mentioned that we have already placed the order for 15 hydrogen fuel cell buses on Tata Motors public domain, so I can take the names. These 15 fuel cell buses will be delivered in a staggered manner by 2023. I think first set of buses are going to come to my R&D center by the middle of 2022, and I'm going to run them by green hydrogen produced from 3 different production pathways. So the basic idea is to test the production pathways, to test the efficacy of hydrogen fuel cell buses in a city transport mode, and also to test some of our prototypes of the composite storage cylinders that we are working on at R&D level. So it's a very composite pilot with a lot of objectives and deliverables. And the 3 green hydrogen pathways that we are pursuing is the electrolytic pathway. In electrolytic pathway also, all kinds of electrolysis, PEM, alkaline, SOEC, all of them will be tested. And then the most important, as Mr. Sanjeev Paul is also saying, that $1 per kg, that is collective ambition of every one of us for production of green hydrogen. And we sincerely believe that effective gasification of biomass, as far as this country is concerned, I think that is going to reach us to that goal. So we are going to set up a pilot production unit of innovative gasification technology for producing green hydrogen. We are working with Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore for this. Our prototype will be ready again by mid-2022. And the green hydrogen thus produced will be fueling these buses, whatever buses that we are doing. We have already set up our second hydrogen refueling station at our Gujarat refinery, and we have an intent of running hydrogen-based fuel cell buses from Baroda to Statue of Unity, Kevadia. We are in dialogue with GSRTC, the local state transport unit. We are also in advanced stage of dialogue with UPSRTC to run hydrogen-based fuel cell buses from Delhi to Agra. These are the pilot projects which are going to showcase the potential and the viability of hydrogen economy in mobility sector, and they will trigger the real demand, future demand in the mobility sector. On the research platform, we are working on a host of things, both in electrolyzer technology, in storage, in transportation. What is the viability of pumping hydrogen in the existing natural gas pipelines? So no harm tests are going on. We are working on novel storage medium, chemical, and the physical pathways for storage. So along the value chain of the hydrogen, we are working. So I hope all these projects will come to fruition by the time the actual demand starts looking up. So these are some of the initiatives in brief by Indian Oil Corporation.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, sir. And it's heartening to note all of those, all of the detail. We have Shilpa with us on this panel from GE, and Mr. Ramakumar was talking about gasification technology for producing green hydrogen, and the moment we're talking about technologies related to these things, it's difficult not to think about GE. So Shilpa, can you first of all brief us about your view on hydrogen? First of all, overall landscape from the point of view of markets, and as a company or as a professional, how do you look at it? Where do we stand in terms of technology adoption? Are we doing the right things in terms of policy, for example? What's your overall view?
Sure. So I think most of the panelists have covered this, but India consumes about 6 million tons of hydrogen every year in industrial sectors, including fertilizers and refineries. And this is expected to go up by fourfold by 2050. Not just from the current industry, but I think increasing demand from transportation and power sectors. And I think we've been hearing that too. So I think that's a growing demand, and how do we get there, and what is India doing? So like everybody, I agree, we are in the nascent stages of green hydrogen development. I think the good initiatives that have been taken by the current government, be it National Hydrogen Mission, it could also be the US and India Hydrogen Task Force that has been put in place. So I think these developments portray India's serious intentions in transitioning towards green hydrogen in the long term. So I think that's a good start. However, there are also challenges that we will need to overcome. Green hydrogen, and we already spoke about this, is costing us about $5 to $6 per kilogram, which is nearly triple the cost of gray hydrogen according to a recent study. So I think by 2030, it's expected that this cost will compete with the hydrocarbon fuels. So we need to make green hydrogen more economically attractive. What we call the LCOH, or the levelized cost of hydrogen. I think that needs to become more competitive. So I think that's one piece. Now coming to technology development and the hydrogen R&D in India, I think that needs to be adequately funded, because the associated costs with the production of green hydrogen are exorbitant. Be it, technology for it, be it manufacturing, storage, transportation. And we see that in some of the countries like US and Europe, government and industries are coming together with government-funded technology development to stay ahead in this space. So I think as we make our vision in India more actionable, it's important to have these right investments in place for the government. The third thing I think everybody touched upon is policy. I think it's important to also understand that different sectors, different industries are going to have different models and policy framework. Because H2, like everybody discussed, actually has the versatility to play an important role in multiple sectors, be transport, residential, industrial, power. So I think it's important that all policymakers, we spread this awareness around the use of hydrogen for power generation and other, key sectors, backed by the latest technology available. So I think those are, in a nutshell, the key points. I think to sum it up, I think it's good that we have started this journey in India. I think the serious intention that the government and the industries are showing. I think now we all need to get together as government, policymakers, industries to define how we get there, right? What technologies we need, what investments we need, what policies we need. I think to make it clear. So I think that's where we think we are in terms of how we market in India for green hydrogen is.
Thank you, Shilpa, for those comments, and I completely agree that it's very important for all the stakeholders to come together and so that the steps we take are not taken in silos, particularly because a lot is hinging upon how successful this strategy and the initial steps are. Let me turn to Anurag now and understand from him. Like I said, RL is very, very often in news in when it comes to and the company has big plans on hydrogen, no doubt about it. So can you share I understand that you represent the tech side of things probably, but then can you share what's your understanding of RIL's overall strategy and plan when it comes to development of hydrogen projects? And if you want any specific highlights that you want to share from R&D point of view, that would be great.
Yeah, Sudhir, thanks. So at least from our chairman's speech in the last two consecutive AGMs, the plan for Reliance, at least in the new energy space, and we call it a new energy space, right? I mean, as we were talking about, it's not just the hydrogen, but the whole thing starting from the electron, the new way of how energy is going to be consumed in the forms it is going to be consumed. So that the strategy is all about starting from the electrons itself, and part of that strategy, the way we think is like in a very holistic manner, right? So we first obviously look at the what is the problem we are trying to define, and if you look back to the history of Reliance, we have tried to solve problem in our own capacity, whatever we could, which is of a national importance, right? So right from the refineries to the retail and then obviously the digital revolution, what we have tried to bring in. So the fourth, let's say leg of the, the journey of Reliance, we think the new energy obviously is an important aspect. And as a part of the decarbonization story, our chairman last year obviously declared our intention to go completely net zero by 2035. And, for a company of the size of Reliance and the diversity of our businesses, that's a very tall, let's say, promise, to go net zero by 2035. But, we believe in, doing, big and challenging problems, solving them, and solving them in a holistic manner. So our hydrogen is also a piece of this whole new energy scheme, where we are starting right from electrons through the solar, technology. And then once that electron is generated, that can be obviously converted into hydrogen or can be stored. So what I was trying to say is, there is like, the hydrogen is a part of that whole strategy, of generating electrons, storing them, and then obviously if that electron can be directly used in the end application, that's the most efficient way. Or otherwise converting into hydrogen and then doing those whole versatile things what hydrogen can offer, used as a heat, used as a material feedstock, or obviously used in the transportation for the mobility as well, right? So as part of that whole strategy, as the chairman alluded, we will put up the giga scale factories. I would like to correlate it to your questions about the R&D. Let me come in here and say that at least this technology is what we are looking at, right? Majority of the technology needed are already at a scale which can be directly implemented and used to let's say produce whatever we are trying to, right? So it's not that the technology is not there. I think the problem is more about the scalability and how to make it economical, right? So that's the piece we are working on. I mean, having said that, it doesn't mean that the R&D will not continue. The R&D has it's an ever growing thing, right? So you will have to work on problems and make it more efficient, more cost effective, bring in the the better technologies. That will go on parallelly. But for us, it's like the pieces are there, the technology pieces are there. How do you put them together so that it can be offered to the end customer, right, in the cost effective manner? And I would like to relate this back to what Ramneet and others were saying about, right, the demand part of it. So when we are talking about this demand projection and everything, you can do this paper exercise. You can think about, look, these are the various elements of where the demand in the current economy is coming. The question is whether the replacement can happen, and that at what price that replacement will happen, right? And the other question is, if not, what is the new price which the market would be able to accept that, right? I mean, we are talking about green and sustainable product ultimately. So at some point, as a global citizen, we have to take cognizance of saying that maybe the business as usual may not go in future, right? And the economy as usual may not go. So the price what we were paying in the past, is that the final price? Because we have been putting this carbon emission under the carpet and have not been paying it for almost a century now, our entire industrial revolutions. So is there any need for now that carbon to be charged in a certain way? And in a way, we are doing that when we are talking about this transition, and we are, investing these trillions of dollars, across the globe. Everyone who will be investing, that's the cost what you did not pay when this whole industrial revolution happened on the backbone of the hydrocarbon, fossil fuels, right? So now you're paying that, and the question is like, to go in the sustainable world, what we're talking about, is there any new price? Is there a discovery of the new price for these products, right? So from that point of view, this is a very holistic approach, let's say, right? And we will have to think on those lines. And if we can solve that, then what is the right price for where you don't have to create this obligations? The market driven economies, right? And we are a market driven economies, unlike some other countries, I wouldn't name, but in that way, if I can make it available to Sanjeev, right? I mean, $1, I mean, he would happily move to it. 0.8, he will jump on it, right? So I think that the challenge is, and that is how we are looking at it, right? How do we solve this whole problem holistically, not just from the production supply chain, as well as the end consumption point of view? And when we are talking about the fuel cell and the battery as part of our pillars of the new energy, we are talking and thinking in terms of the consumer as well, right? I mean, what all we can do so that the whole hydrogen economy happens at once, because otherwise the chicken egg problem, which is what the hydrogen economy has been facing right from the beginning, the supply chain issue, that needs to be solved simultaneously. So our strategy is simply this: we need to move this just like how we did in the Geo. Let's say, Geo. What are we doing in the Geo, right? Geo is basically a pipeline which gives you data, but then there are applications. There are whole sorts of let's say the consumption built around it. Otherwise, building a pipeline and supplying to your customers doesn't mean anything. So you have to think the entire thing in a holistic manner. And in Reliance, we take a lot of pain and go through this lot of exercise to understand the problem what we are trying to solve, and how do we put ourselves in the customer shoes, and then look at this whole thing. Now, just coming back to your R&D thing in a minute, Sudhir. The hydrogen economy is enormous, right? I mean, one can go through a multi-hour session on this, just what hydrogen economy involves. And obviously there are technology development needed in each and every aspect, and that will happen. But I don't think we need to wait for that, right? And also from an India point of view, what I would suggest, we should not be reclusive in nature. We should go and collaborate and partner globally, right? Because a lot of economies and people have done what we are trying to do. So we shouldn't get into just reinventing the wheel. We shouldn't shy away from learning from others and use what others are doing, because it's very important to very quickly get ourselves onboarded on this moving train, and then probably think of what we can add to this. I mean, obviously we have our own strength as the Indian economy, particularly our SME, right? I mean, they would they would come in and chip in their own way, but we shouldn't shy away from using the international technology, because what we offer to them is market, right? I mean, as Ravneet again was talking about what we did in the LED, we gave them the huge demand, and the whole LED bulbs and the technology came down to the price point, which is now really affordable. Nobody thinks of the condensate bulbs now, right? Everybody goes and buy the LED. So that will happen. So what we offer to the global world is the sheer size, right? As an economy. And once that happens, the technologies will come in, the new technologies will get developed, because people have to compete to get into that market at a in a cost effective manner. So that's my again a limited point so I wanted to share, but happy to divulge more when we discuss further. Thanks.
Sure. I really like the analogy of LEDs. No doubt, a lot of really important path picking kind of work that India has done on LEDs, and a lot has gone into it. It's from a strategy point of view, it's a case study from market development side, no doubt. Let me quickly turn to Mr. Paul here, and you wanted to share something about demand, of course, and Tata Steel's own in your own view, how does Tata Steel stand to gain from this larger so to speak, national focus on developing the hydrogen economy, and how crucial it is for the development of hydrogen, for Tata Steel's long-term growth. Yeah.
Thanks, Sudhir. First, on the demand side, see, demand will kickstart the reduction in the current 4 to 5, maybe even higher dollars cost per kg of hydrogen. But to get into this virtuous cycle of increasing demand for feeding into the reduction in costs, regulatory frameworks will need to be supporting it. Currently, the costs of hydrogen, capital costs for production of hydrogen, and then if I have to talk of steel, you need to, the current assets won't work. The current assets are all designed for fossil fuel-based processes, coal-based processes. You will need, and those assets come at $1 billion per million ton of steel capacity. Going forward, if you're going to go for another 300 million tons in this country in the next 30 odd years, this $1 billion is going to be increased by 30 to 40%. Who's going to make these, investments in primary, capacities, unless there is a policy framework which is supporting these increased costs? A good way of supporting these costs and creating a level playing field for the entire industry would be something that Anurag Pandey alluded to, a price for carbon. If there's a price for emission of carbon, something like what exists in the European Union today, today it is running at around 60 to 62 euro per ton of emissions. If something like that comes in, then there will be a rapid decline in the cost of hydrogen as well. So whilst $1 per kg of hydrogen would be something which will be viable, I also said that it would be viable at $40 per ton of carbon dioxide emission as well. So you need both to make these capacities viable going forward. And this is something that is required as a support coming from government, because unless the regulatory framework moves ahead, the technology to bring down those costs will not accelerate at the same pace. The second thing that government will also need to do to kickstart the demand is to create market. It is doing the GHCO part, which is good, but only for the fertilizer production and petroleum refining as of now. This needs to move in other sectors of the economy as well going forward. It hasn't as yet begun. And whilst the Prime Minister has announced 2070 as our target for net neutrality, it's my take that we haven't heard the last on it as yet. This is something that we will continue to hear about. But there is very stringent targets that he has mentioned for 2030. And even if we have to meet that, there is a lot of policy interventions that will need to happen. And I can see the government of India already cognizant of that and looking to work on that. So market making in terms of supporting green products, government buying green products, or at least mandating buying of green products, even for infrastructure, etc., and then supporting with carbon pricing, which will help push the cost of production at the primary level down the value chain. A cost of increase, let us say, of around $150 to $200 in the production of steel would end up meaning just around 5% more at the auto level, or 3% more at the house level, at the infrastructure level. So down the value chain, the impact is much lower. But at the primary level, the impact is much higher, and that impact needs to be normalized for the economy. So I thought I'll just mention that going forward. On the R&D front, just like everybody else, Tata Steel is cognizant of what is happening, and we are also engaging in enough, technology, proof of concepts and pilots, including gasification of biomass, which Dr. Ramakumar spoke about.
So that helps a lot, no doubt. Let me turn to Ravneet now and ask her. When you gave an initial comment, you slightly covered, Invest India's focus, of course. But if you can, touch upon other things and, very briefly tell us what exactly are the different focus areas in terms of projects or different companies being supported, etc., and how, that'd be great.
Sure. So I think firstly, I mean, thank you, Sanjeev, for your points. I think, very relevant, and it'll be good to connect with you after this. Vis-a-vis some things you mentioned specifically as far as not just a primary, but the impact for housing vis-a-vis auto, vis-a-vis the steel industry, and how that sort of needs to be factored in. I think that's a point that hasn't been discussed enough and needs to be put out there as we are in a discussion stage where policies are still getting drafted and a regulatory framework still really needs to come into place. And I think that is something where, Invest India has a great role to play in terms of providing a very, robust platform for articulation of exactly such points as you raised in a formal, manner, and to be able to communicate that, with the relevant stakeholders. So, trying to bring everyone, onto the same platform and, voicing those views out there so that they are I would say assimilated in the right fashion and the right manner as need be. But even in terms of scouting technological advances that there are in other countries as well, that there's a great deal of effort that we're doing in terms of through various partners that we have across the world in terms of outreach that we're doing and facilitating those conversations with players here as well. And therefore, I've been in touch with some of you on this group already. And I think platforms like these, thanks to you, Sudhir, also provide me an access and an avenue into other people that I feel who are not well roped into the formal conversation that we need to really bring in, at multiple discussion levels and not just a few. Vis-a-vis, creating markets, I think all of you all have covered that to a fair bit, and I also did too. But I think it's important to re-emphasize the need for a public-private partnership, to de-risk that initial investment. For example, even as Sanjeev was mentioning, that who is going to put in that upfront investment for that change that you're looking for? And I think that's not a way that we can expect either the industry or the government to go the whole hog solo. And we will need to look at newer and more innovative mechanisms of these public-private partnerships beyond an MOU or a tendering route as well. And over there, I really feel like maybe Dr. Ramkumar would also probably have something to add. But I think that's really something where we're headed. But one point that I feel, because everyone feels so passionately about the subject vis-a-vis where they're coming from and their point of view. One point that I feel that hasn't been touched upon to an extent, which I feel, if time permitting, Sudhir, I would want to hear the views of the other panelists also. And is what can be done. We have, a great, I would say, a quorum here from Reliance to Tata to IOCL and me at Invest India. I feel that there needs to be adequate conversation also for creating, hydrogen production hubs to start off with, one, I would say larger, hub that could aggregate system impacts and, have a shared infrastructure, lower cost of supply to a larger number of end users, and would also require overlapping ministerial responsibilities, which can then be roped into the right manner. And I think that's probably, I feel, food for thought for your next session, Sudhir.
Okay, sure. Thank you for the suggestion, Ravneet. And you said if you have time, we don't have time. Unfortunately, we have significantly overshot the time limit. But turning to Shilpa, Shilpa, how does GE Gas Power, plan to tap into this opportunity, which is now opened up by this, rapidly building awareness and focus on hydrogen? As an industrial input, of course. Can you also share some highlights for us of the work being done in your office, for example, or in GE on this front?
So GE is committed to fully support hydrogen decarbonization for customers. In fact, we lead the space with more than 30 years of experience in operating with fuels that have contained a blend of hydrogen. So this experience includes our E and F class gas turbines or our aeroderivative gas turbines that have operated like in 19 countries, generated over 500 terawatt hours of electricity. So our fleet leader, GE's fleet leader, has over 180,000 hours operating on a fuel that has contained up to 95% hydrogen. space is really strong. Now, as we progress towards 100% hydrogen for power generation, now there are areas that we are focusing on because hydrogen has very different properties when compared to natural gas. So operating a gas turbine with hydrogen will require changes, say, to the combustion system, to the fuel system, materials that someone alluded to, plant safety systems. So I think while the basic configuration of the gas turbine will remain unchanged for hydrogen, there would be specific areas that we would be looking at, and that's something that we are working on at GE. And these areas are like fuel delivery, piping, and the associated components. There's combustion systems, there's controls, gas turbine enclosures, heat recovery steam generators, etc. There are also additional operational challenges with hydrogen that relate to the overall plant safety, and I think we discussed this a little, because the flame propagation speed of hydrogen is higher than natural gas. So I think using hydrogen may require the installation of, say, sensors and other instrumentation specifically for fuels that are containing hydrogen. So I think there's an upstream impact and a downstream impact on systems when a combined cycle power plant that will need to be taken care of. But we also need to remember, that all this is going to take time, right? We need the whole hydrogen ecosystem in place. Production, technology, storage, transportation. So while this whole ecosystem develops, and it's going to take a couple of years, before it really is available for all of us to use. But there are actions that we can take in the short term, like decarbonizing existing and new gas power plants to avoid a carbon lock-in, rightly say. So mixing hydrogen with natural gas, of course, is the first practical step towards transitioning to a zero carbon fuel or deploying carbon capture solutions. So I think these are the two things that we're looking at, and we believe that in order for the power sector to rapidly decarbonize at the speed that the world needs while maintaining high levels of reliability, both these options for gas turbines are viable tools even today. So I think that's the part that we foresee, that the first thing would be natural gas and hydrogen blends. Then we move to carbon capture. So this is the short-term outlook that GE has, and in the future, of course, we move to blue and green hydrogen as it becomes available. So GE is continuing to advance capability of its gas turbine fleet to 100% hydrogen, and also integrating carbon capture solutions through internally funded R&D programs or to externally or state-funded private programs. So we recently received funding from the Department of Energy in the US to integrate a 95% commercial carbon capture solution and demonstrate it on an existing natural gas combined cycle site. So this is something that I think we could also try in India, and with the right kind of investments in place. So the last part that I wanted to touch upon, especially I think it helps everybody who is really listening in, is that GE recently launched white papers and podcast series to present an evaluation of the ways of hydrogen usage and spreading general awareness around how using future fuels like hydrogen can contribute towards mitigating the impact of climate change and decarbonization of the energy sector. So I think these are really very informative podcasts and papers, and I would strongly recommend to anybody that is listening in that you look into this, because I think that's how we create this awareness. So that is how we are working towards decarbonization.
Thank you. Thank you, Shilpa. And no doubt awareness has a very, very important role to play. Whenever something new happens, something new, whenever a new beginning takes place. Anyway, so I think, it's one topic that I'm sure all of us want to talk more and more and more, but then time is not always on our side. And in fact, we have significantly overshot the time. But what a pleasure it was to, interact with all of you. One thing that, my own key takeaway is that people from so many different backgrounds, you get to learn so much from each one of you. And if I were to sum up this discussion, a lot of really important points came up. Mr. Ramkumar talked about, the thing to remember is that he said, time for hydrogen is here, and the debate is no more on, why hydrogen, but when and how, right, etc. He's also, given details of the draft hydrogen roadmap and consumption obligation, etc. Very important points, and the sooner we work upon these things, the better. Anurag has talked about growth with sustainability, and how he's saying that this discussion has just started, and I would personally remember the RE 2.0 point he made about how we have with hydrogen moved from the electron to molecular form of storage. And again, chicken egg problem of supply and demand is to be dealt with as soon as possible. And, the other important point he talked about is learning from others is very important. He's referring to other countries and their other markets and their experience. Very important points. Mr. Paul talked about the maths of carbon emissions and how hydrogen will remain relevant for steelmaking technology, of course, but subject to the how cost plays out. He also said that regulatory framework is still at a nascent stage, but it is also important to understand what are the different demand drivers and spurred growth on demand side also, along with policy push. Ravneet has given a lot of details about the important work being done by Invest India, and she's also saying that there is little focus on demand. That's something we need to work on. She also has a suggestion on how we can look at creating a production hub. And and then Shilpa has talked about the need to rapidly decarbonize, and we can never overlook that. And gas and hydrogen blends is something that we have to work upon in the future. Of course, there is the debate about blue and green hydrogen, but the transition has to be gas and hydrogen blends. And how she's also given details about GE's own work in this direction, and for example, the funding from DOE, which was in news recently also, for CCS. So a lot of really important points, a lot of really important takeaways. Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen. Please carry on, and I really look forward to hosting again on this platform. Thank you. Thanks for your time. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for the detailed discussion and for bringing out the valid points. Now we'll proceed to the next session. Stay connected to your screens.